Thank you for joining us today for Liberty Technology Advisors December webcast. Today we're going to be talking about aligning your ERP systems with your company growth plan. Just a quick look at the agenda. So we'll go over some brief intros, and then we're going to spend a bulk of the time really talking about the main topic, which is aligning your ERP system with your growth plan. We'll go ahead and talk about ERP assessment, look at some success measures, and also some metrics that you can measure for your pulse check. And then we'll save some time for Q&A from you guys. So just housekeeping, if you have any questions at all during the webcast, please either shoot them through the Q&A portal, or you can just use the chat window, whichever's easiest, and we'll work those in if we can during the presentation, or we'll save those for the end, and John will go ahead and address them again. So just a quick overview of LTA and who we are. We're a 100% independent strategic management consulting company, founded in 1995. Our team of ERP experts average over 20 years of experience and are very passionate about what they do. I'll look at some of our services. We do specialize in ERP selection and project management, and business process reengineering and execution, and that really branches all the way out to technology advisory services with cloud strategy, IT strategy, roadmap, interim CIO, project rescue. So really, if there's a way for us to help streamline your business processes and help you get the most out of your company, we're here to help you out. Today, we are lucky to be joined by one of Liberty Technology Advisors co-founders, John Berglind. And John has been a member of the team for quite some time and been on countless ERP projects. And prior to working at Liberty Technology Advisors, John was a vice president as well as a CFO. So he is more than qualified to be sharing his insight with you. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome John. Hey, John.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Greatly appreciated. As Brad had said, if you have questions, you can either go through the portal or the chat box, and we'll try to work them into the presentation. And if not, we'll answer them afterwards. So ERP assessment, and why should you evaluate this regularly? Really, you want to answer a couple of questions. One of which is, does your ERP system still meet your key and unique functional requirements? Your requirements are going to change over time, whether it be through business growth, strategy change, marketplace change, whatever that may be. And a lot of companies don't go back and look at their ERP system and say, how can this help us, or how can it help us function better? And so you want to go back in and look that over. Identify key deficiencies in your current ERP system. You want to take a look at what you have and where it may be deficient, and can be bolstered by a configuration or a process change, something in there so that the ERP system is still supporting whatever your key and unique requirements are from a key deficiency standpoint. Are you using your whole ERP system? You would actually be surprised at how often we go in to do an assessment, and the ERP system we're being told that their ERP system is not working correctly and doesn't support their business any longer. And we find out that they're using 15 or 20 or 25 or 50% of what the package actually has from a functional standpoint. So you really want to take a look at it and evaluate that against what your ERP system can do, not just what it is doing right now. Every system has strengths and opportunities, and so really exploiting those, taking a look to see which ones you can turn on, which you may want to turn off, because it's creating additional non-value-added process or work that has to be done. You also want to identify skill and competency gaps of your workforce using the ERP system. When we take a look at this, you'll see it says Excel and a question mark. Look to see how many workbooks. We've got a client right now they're a fairly large client, but they have 27,000 Excel workbooks right now that are active within the last 30 days. That's a lot of work being done outside of the system, and those things that are being done outside of the system seldom make it back into the system. And so you start to question what your source of truth is. A lot of times this comes back to training and systemic training. We always say that you've got Bob who trained Alice, and Alice learned 80% of what Bob knew. And then Alice trained Ted, and Ted knows 80% of what Alice knows. And that continues to go on down the line until you get a degradation in what people really know about the system and how to use it. So systemic training is really part of that. And systemic training has to be more than just system training. You have to also ask yourself, why am I doing this? What process am I supporting? And how does this add value to the customer? And then have a plan for regularly identifying and resolving ERP issues that cause bottlenecks. Some of those could be process related, and maybe the process needs to change. Some of them may be system related, and maybe the system needs to change or be configured differently or used differently to be able to do that. But if you don't have a plan for identifying that and some kind of governance that's in there that says, here's what we're going to do to correct this, then it just doesn't happen. Or it gets put onto a ticket, a service ticket someplace, and it sits there for 6 months. Or maybe it gets resolved, but nobody knows it's resolved. So there's a lot of different areas that you can have that plan put in place for and regularly conduct and execute against that plan.
Great. You want to share about some ERP success measures?
Yes. So, my question is going to be, do you have key performance indicators that evaluate the effectiveness of your ERP system? In other words, how does your system support your business, and how are you tracing that and tracking that? Because you can't manage what you can't measure, and you can't measure what you don't have. So by doing that, you're actually monitoring the system performance to the business operation and how well is it supporting it. Just about everybody knows they've got metrics in place for business performance. You need to put them in place for the system performance. A lot of times when we're talking to clients and when we're out at client sites doing an assessment for them, they'll say, well, they're using Excel because the system performance is so slow when we try to do this. And we find out different things. Some of the technology related, like the indices aren't set up on the database. Some of them are process related. Some of them are, you're just running a lot of stuff and you're only using a very little. So really trying to get that down to somewhat of a science. And then measuring the adoption rate of your ERP system. Is it really being used? And the only way to do that is to really sit down with people and say, what is working and what isn't working? And if they show you how they do the work and what they do, you can see some performance gaps. We have a client recently that we were at, and they weren't using the barcode scanners in the warehouse. They were doing all the transfers on the computer, on laptops and on desktops, the workstations that they had out there. And when we asked them why, they showed us how they have to do the scan, and it took them twice as long to do the scan because of the way that they had to use the scanner. And so the system was not usable. They wanted to use the scanner. It was easier than typing it into the computer, but because of timing, they chose not to. And is the ERP system being used the way it's supposed to be used? Are you sure that in the shipping area, they're not writing stuff down on a yellow pad of paper and then entering it in later? Is production and direct labor being reported on a regular basis, or is it being written down and entered in after a shift? So those are the types of things you want to measure. You want to get the leading indicators and the lagging indicators. So on-time shipping, for instance, is a great indicator, but it's a lagging indicator. How long does it take to process the shipment is a leading indicator. And that will give you a better view and vantage point into how the system is being used, and is it being used in the best way, in the highest and best way.
Great. So I think from here, we'll go ahead and move on to some real life examples. So yeah, take it away.
Okay, so we've got a wine and spirits distributor in New York City. And we went in to do an initial assessment for them that turned into a business process reengineering engagement with them. When we took a look at what they were doing, they had developed all kinds of processes which the system could handle to a great degree, but because they weren't using the system effectively and because they were doing spot solutions on things to fix things. So if somebody came to IT and said, this particular function isn't working for me, this is how I want it to work, they would just fix that function without looking at it both upstream and downstream. And by doing that, you ended up with a system now that was disjointed. It was not integrated as much as it should have been. And really some of those processes could have been streamlined to work within the system instead of work outside of the system, or configure or customize the system to have it work with it. The result was they need to upgrade or go through a re-implementation of their ERP system, because now their system is so customized that it is not functional for them. And to remove those customizations would be egregiously expensive. We also have a materials handling manufacturing company in Indiana, a little bit similar. Their processes were disjointed because of the interaction that they had with their other sister companies. So the manufacturing group that gave it to the distribution group, which gave it to the finance group. So all of those, which eventually went out to dealerships, all of those different functions, the business processes weren't aligned. And because those processes weren't aligned, they again went down the path of doing a lot of spot solutions. The system that they have now is a bit butchered. It's functional, it works, but it's causing a lot of headaches and a lot of unnecessary and non-value added business processes to be performed. And as we always say, if you're doing a business process that's not adding value to your customer, and what I mean by that is your customer's not willing to pay for it, then you should stop doing it. They can't stop doing it because it's the only way that they can use their system to help support what they're trying to get done in their business. We also have an industrial automation manufacturing company. Their implementation of the system did not go well the first time around. And so as a result, they were doing a lot of things outside of the system. Their needs changed pretty significantly. And in the process of their needs changing, they didn't go back and look at the ERP system to see how it could help. They went extensively into Excel. They went extensively into Access databases. They had a couple of SQL databases. But the resultant was that they couldn't get a straight financial statement without going through a lot of different hoops to see what was in WIP, what was percent complete. And all those calculations could be done within the system, but because they would be done outside of the system in Excel, by the time they came back and looked at the data that was in the system, it may have changed. So they didn't know which version of the truth to believe. So through the assessment that we did, we came up with key and unique requirements for them. And those key and unique requirements are now being used to go and look at some other systems that exist out there that may help drive them in the direction that they want to go and get them off of Excel and off of Access and start using the system the way they want it to be used.
All right. Well, with that, I think that we are going to go ahead and just transition to questions. It looks like we did have two that came in while you guys, or excuse me, while you were talking, John. So we'll start with those. But as we are asking and answering, if anyone else has questions, definitely send them in. So the first question is, what role does BPR play in selecting a new system? In particular, how do you make sure when you select a new ERP system that you do not implement the same old business processes?
That's actually a very good question, and a lot of people overlook that. Really what you want to do is, a lot of times in the selection of the new system, we'll go through a high-level business process re-engineering workshops, and those workshops will be meant to drive out and so that we can get a common understanding of what the current state of the business is. What we recommend is in that process that you form a cross-functional team. So even though we may be talking about accounting or manufacturing or manufacturing distribution, accounting will also sit in on that session so that they can get a full view of everything that's happening. That drives the key and unique requirements that you'll need, and it also drives the areas that you know you will need improvement when you get to the future state. So we've equally had clients who have done this before the ERP selection and either enhanced it or did a deeper dive after the selection in part of the implementation process. So it happens along both lines. And we have other companies who will go ahead and do their system selection, and then we'll do the BPR with the software vendor or the VAR attending, and they use that as part of their discovery session. So it kind of goes both ways. Did that answer the first question?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. So next question, and you briefly mentioned this in your last answer. Should BPR happen before or after the ERP implementation?
It should happen either as part of the implementation or part of the selection. If you're going to do it as part of the implementation, it should be the first activity after your contracts are signed. And like we said, we like to have the VAR and or the software vendor in there so that they're discovering what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then when we get into the future state, even though we develop the future state to be system agnostic, they get a good feel for where you're taking this and how you want to take it. And they're many times already doing their design docs in that process.
Great. All right, next question. You mentioned earlier about having success measures tied to the ERP system and its performance. Should these measures be a part of the IT performance plan, operations plan, or some other plan?
Yes, they should be part of both. You want to be part of both because part of the ERP success is going to be the adoption rate, and that adoption rate is going to be based on how well the operations group is using the system. IT performance plan should include these success measures because it can have to do with system performance, how many people are in the system at once, how long are they in the system. So you're going to want to look at some of those metrics as well. It's the combination of those two success measures, when you bring them both together, that will tell you how well your system is performing.
Great. Again, if anyone has questions, we are early on the time, so we do have a few more minutes to help answer any other questions. Here, looks like one came through. When looking to acquire new companies as part of our growth plan, we have only given a cursory look at the cursory look at the ERP system in the past. How would you recommend we evaluate the ERP system to make sure it is an inhibitor to our performance goals?
That's a really good question. We spend a lot of time working with private equity groups, and as part of their due diligence, we go in and look at the ERP systems that are in place currently. Some of these private equity groups want the portfolio to run on the same ERP system. Some don't care what ERP system that runs on, but they want to know if they have, if there has to be a significant investment in the ERP system, capital investment, to get it up to speed, to get it to where they want it to go. We've been brought in sometimes because even a non-private equity group acquisition where the CFO or the controller of the company that acquired them is saying, it's taken them 15 days to get us their numbers at the end of the month. Why is it taking them so long to close? And so we believe that you need to, do a deep dive on their ERP system to say how effective it's going to be. How much money will I need to put into this? Is it more cost effective to bring them over to our system? Is it more cost effective to get them to a new system, or is it more cost effective to fix them on what they're currently running? So it is important to take a look at that because it can be an inhibitor, and it's a hidden cost a lot of times to companies once they acquire another organization. They're just, they get hit with that, and now they're staggering a bit. So I would take a look at it and make sure that it supports the performance of the business and performance goals that you have.
Great. Do you believe every company needs BPR services?
I think anytime you get into the extremes of every and never, I always shy back. I think most companies can benefit from it. There's a couple of quotes that I really enjoy. One of them's from Edward Deming, and he says, change is not mandatory or is not necessary because survival is not mandatory. Everybody has to change. And so if you're not looking at your business processes and how they need to change to better support your customers, especially in this day and age when, basically things are moving at the speed of Amazon and the speed of light, then I think you may get left behind. I use a couple examples of this. Everybody who has a smartphone, go ahead and pull up your Rand McNally app. One of the greatest photography companies in the world is now really just part of I'm going to buy this because I want to put it in my office. They do have an app out there. It's expensive, and there's, I think, 9 users. One of the theses that we did a while back is if Chicago Northwestern had realized they were in the transportation business and not the railroad industry, you'd be flying them today. So change is always happening, and if you let the change happen and then try to catch up to it, it's going to be a little like pushing water up a hill. You'd rather stay in front of the change and be able to control it and be able to implement it at your pace and your speed instead of at the speed of your competitors.
Great. It looks like that is all the questions. Please feel free to keep typing in as we wrap up. But again, thank you for joining us. If you do want to talk more and you think of a question later today or later in the week, definitely reach out. Our practice director, Joe Ambrose, is happy to go ahead and talk with anyone who's wanting to learn more. His email is on the screen, joe.ambrose@ltadvisors.com, as well as his phone number. And if you like what you heard today, we will be sending up a follow-up email with a survey. So if you could please just take a few minutes to fill that out, and we'll also be including some more information soon on our webcast coming in January. It doesn't look like we have any more questions that have come through. So John, thank you for joining us and taking some time to share your insights.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for your time. We truly appreciate it.